our program this evening of our distinguished panel discussion entitled Women in OD, ODN SoCal Founders Discuss Community, Strategy, and Success Tactics. While I'll ask the panelists to self-introduce shortly to celebrate Women's History Month, let me say we are thrilled to have our esteemed panelists. Thank you so much. So Miss Ellie Sitton, Dr. Stephanie Jo Gomez, and Dr. Deanna Ball. They have a wealth of experience, and we're going to have a great panel discussion where they're going to share their unique career journeys and hard-won experience insights into the ever-evolving OD field, including navigating challenges and the essential competencies they have observed for OD success. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists. I'm going to do the little reactions. There's reactions at the bottom. You could do that as well. All right. So as I mentioned, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our panelists to self-introduce. And Dr. Ball, would you like to start us off?
All right, sure. I'd be happy to start us off. Hi, everybody. I am Deanna Ball, and it is such a pleasure to be here tonight to talk about one of my favorite topics, this wonderful field of OD. And it's wonderful to see some friendly faces out there. So thank you for carving out time in your busy evenings to be here with us tonight. So for me, when I think about OD, it really is more than just the work that we do. And I think just based on the breakout, this is probably a shared experience, but it truly is a calling and it truly is a way of life. And so that's going to be a little bit about what we probably talk about tonight. But I am, in my career, I am an OD consultant. I'm an executive coach. And I am also the founder of HPO Partners, which is a consultancy focusing on building high-performing organizations. I am also a mom. You may hear my son and my dogs in the background, but I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, and I am a huge advocate of all things DEI. I feel like I just need to put that out there right now and the way the world is going. And that's a little bit about me. And so I'm going to now turn it over to my friend, Stephanie Jo.
Thank you, Deanna. You're also a friend, a great friend. So I'm Stephanie Jo. I go by SJ in the workplace and sometimes out of the workplace. At home, I'm sometimes called Jo. I go by many names, but not Steffi. I hate that. I am a internal, primarily OD consultant with Kaiser Permanente. I have over 35 years with the organization and over 20 plus years in the field. And I would say I'm a generalist in Kaiser Permanente. You need to know a little bit about almost every subspecialty of OD that there is. And I really enjoy partnering with my OD colleagues and my leadership development colleagues. We have an amazing team, and I think we practice OD in its purest forms. And I feel very blessed to be working for the organization and with such a talented group of individuals. And I've actually been out of work on a medical leave with some hand surgery, so I haven't been to work in about 5 months. So I was saying the other day, I'm like, oh, I feel disconnected. I'm going to be talking about OD and work and challenges. And I sat and reflected today, and I got so excited, like just thinking about the early days of my path in OD and learning, career transition, the people I've met along the way. I'm so happy to see some familiar faces, and there's so many people to give credit to for the organization being where it's at today. But that's a little bit about me. I am single. I raised my niece. I have locked up my cats in my room because they were crawling around last night, although I can hear my cat thumping around trying to desperately break out of the room upstairs. But they won't be crawling across the camera. That's it. Animal.
Smart idea.
Yeah, that's it for now.
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with everyone tonight. And I am Elizabeth Sitton, and my nickname is Ellie, and I have been doing OD for, gosh, over 20 years. I actually started in HR, did OD for the majority of my career, and then decided that I wanted to expand my horizons into leadership development. So I also work with Stephanie Joe at Kaiser Permanente, and I do some consulting as well. I keep very busy. I'm also a mom of a 20-year-old who just moved back home. And I've got a cat that is also, she's a big part of my life. I do writing. I have a book coming out hopefully in July called Authentic Connection, The Lost Art of Face-to-Face Communication. And I've written a memoir about my life, which is being considered right now for the screen, which is exciting. I also love to paint. My background, let's see, I worked also for like Hulu and Disney and HealthNet and Omnicom Group and a couple of other companies. So big corporate background, but most grateful for the fact that I work for the best company that I've ever seen, Kaiser Permanente right now. It is just an amazing place to be, great people. It's very hard to get in, and therefore the people that are there, I think, are just fantastic. It's been a privilege. I got to actually co-found KP Leadership University back 7 years ago, and it's thriving now. So thanks.
That's awesome. Well, I can hardly wait to hear from the wealth of experience that you all mentioned. We're going to get into what you've learned over your career and really sharing with members some of the navigating challenges, the tips that you've learned, and also some of the competencies that you see is really valuable. But before we do that, I am very curious to learn, being that I am the co-chair of ODN SoCal. I remember hearing the history of our organization, and it was mentioned that women started, and I was like, hoorah, I need to know more. So please, if you might, share with me, how do you all know one another? What is this Women in OD? Pray tell.
Okay. I can start. So
Please do.
when I was in grad school, because I'm a networker, connecting is one of my things. I got involved in LAODN. So I think we were an affiliate. I don't think we were an official chapter at the time, but people on the call, like Scott Weimer, was on the board, and I got very involved on the local and at the national level. And in around 1999, the LAODN was kind of going through this transition, and there were members that wanted to kind of reinvent and really revitalize the group. And shortly thereafter, we had a new board come on. And I remember at that intersection in time, there was a lot of discussion about OD and coaching, and what is it, what is it not? Is coaching a subspecialty of OD, or coaching is bigger, OD's under it? And so the organization, and I may have this wrong, and Scott could probably correct me. He'd been very instrumental for many years. Switched over. I'm not sure what happened, but over for a couple of years, it kind of petered out a bit. And thanks to people like Jonathan Tripper and Scott Weimer, probably Michael Baroff too, they had the ASTD OD group. And so that was a place where people in the LA community could go and connect. But for some of us that were newer to the field and just coming out of graduate school, we still felt like we were missing something locally. And so we would gather, at least my colleagues from CSBP, over breakfasts and lunch, and talk about our early career and new models, and what our challenges were. And then eventually that was Samantha Breutman, Anna Perlman, Nancy Sardi, spoke to Allie, was really connected with the MSOD at Pepperdine. So then we're like, we should get everybody together, all these women early in our careers, and start talking. So we did a social event, and it was going to be a nighttime one over cocktails at the Firefly in Studio City. And that was really fun. And it was just filled with connection and excitement and energy. And kind of the big question was, should we do this again? If so, what do we need from each other? And so that led to a more formal process to create the organization, which then became Women in OD. And so I remember Melissa Cars, Ellie, myself, and Samantha Brightman facilitated an appreciative inquiry process. And I remember at that time I had just started using AI. Allie had experience with it. So we created this whole process, and over a series of 3 meetings, I think. One at Kaiser Permanente, one somewhere on the west side. We actually came up with our provocative statement, our mission, our gifts, and that began Women in OD. And that was around for a couple of years, very, very organic, grassroots, meeting in people's homes. I remember we were at Deanna's house one time.
I think we went to Ann
It was-
McCloskey's house too once.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
had a meeting at a Mazurik's house in LA, like up in the hills. And he had just published a book about the year prior for OD consulting with Marisa Pay. Marisa was one of my instructors. So it was just a really fun time. And we were still figuring things out, and just everybody sharing and connecting, both personally and professionally. And then in about 2005, we did a special session on diversity, and we opened it up to men, and a lot of men came. And that started the whole conversation of like, oh, should we be open? Why is it just women? The guys are like, hey, we want to come. But I don't think it was for another couple of years where we actually then became LAODN, and then started having mixed events where it was open to everybody. And we were affiliated with the national, but not part of a chapter. So that was OD in LA. I'm sorry, OD in LA, which pretty much kept our provocative statement of who we were with a few tweaks. And I want to give a big shout out like to Jeremy Lurie, because over a period of time, the group would start to wither down because it's a lot of work, time, energy, commitment. So all of you that are volunteering on the board, kudos to you. So those original founders, we would get together periodically to say, okay, how do we keep this going? And Jeremy at Plus Delta Consulting, he offered some of his time and some of his staff to do some of the administrative work to keep it up and running for quite some time. But that's kind of how I remember it, but I'm sure you guys have other things to share and add.
Yeah, that absolutely covered it. I don't know what more to add other than that. What we were doing with the Pepperdine MSOD alumni group, which I started, was every person presented something that they were doing, and everyone got copies of it, and we got our hands in it, and we really talked about it. And it was very different than a networking meeting or a presentation, which is what I was experiencing in the other groups. And so Samantha and I remember we were on the phone and we're like, oh my gosh, we have to do something. We have to just bring us all together in a new format. And I remember that meeting or that gathering at Firefly like it was yesterday. And I remember people talking about really personal things that had to do with or women-centric topics. And that's why we went with women in OD, because we had a lot of people really wanted that connection that was more gender focused. So that's how that happened. It wasn't to exclude men, but it was really to create a forum where people felt safe to discuss things that weren't necessarily just professional. So yeah.
And it
Yeah.
seems to me like it really brings this whole professional association, brings this sense of community. And I know, Deanna, you have mentioned, you guys didn't talk about how you guys have known each other necessarily, but I believe it was from this association, correct?
Well, it was from a variety of avenues. I mean, certainly grad school was, an impetus for a lot of these relationships. The ODN, National ODN Network, was a huge connector for us. And then this women in OD. And I remember when we were first kind of starting out and we were going to the ODN conferences, and there was lots of wine and lots of cocktails in all of these events, by the way. It was, and they were all in person. And and it was there was a feeling of a very grassroots movement. And we even kind of splintered off. This wasn't the women in OD, but this was something called the Future of OD, where there was a group of us. There were probably 12 of us. SJ, keep me honest here. And we all showed up at Jeremy Lurie's house, and it was after a big ODN conference. And we said, we really need to talk about what is the future of this field and what is the future of OD, and, how do we carry the torch of these gurus that we've, who have imparted their wisdom. And so we all got together, and it was almost like a tea group. We locked ourselves in the house for 3 days. And we basically couldn't leave. I think we all took one walk around the lake, and we just really kind of talked about what is the future. And there was so much passion, and there was so much commitment. And this time was really special because there was the women in OD, there was the future of OD, there was the ODN, and it was very much a grassroots feeling. And I think that created a commitment that is just unparalleled. And it created relationships that have been lifelong. And
That's what I was going.
yeah, it's
That's what I
amazing.
wanted to mention. I remember you said, and I want to kind of pivot the conversation a little bit. I'm curious to learn how being a part of this association, it sounds impactful and tremendous, like, being so inspired and being with others who have a vision for the future. And I love what struck me was not AI, artificial intelligence, AI, my passion project, that's old school, appreciative inquiry. I would love to learn how you guys created that. That's amazing. But you mentioned, I know in the past, Deanna, that you blame, and you said you use that word intentionally, you blame SJ for your career. Do you guys want to talk about a little bit about how being a part of a group like this, coming together in each other's homes, being a part of these associations and these long-term relationships, what impact has that had?
Yeah, I do blame SJ for my career. I'm eternally grateful for this. There's a few people and a few institutions that I blame. She's one of them. I would say Alliant University, which at the time was CSPP, is another one that I blame for my career. The reason I blame SJ for my career specifically is because when I started out at CSPP, my vision, my goal was to be an external consultant. That is what I wanted to do. It was my calling. And I did do that. I did that for a few years. And then I had a mentor that said to me, listen, if you really want to be good as an external consultant, you need to spend some time inside. And you need to understand firsthand what the dysfunction of organizations really are in order for you to truly be an effective external consultant. And so I kind of said, okay, I think I have to go internal for a couple of years. Didn't really want to do it. And then SJ called and said, hey, we have an opening at Kaiser, and this would be a really great opportunity. And I didn't know much about it, but she said, you'll be leading change in communications and doing OD for the claims department. And there's 2 unions, but don't worry about it. It's going to be really, really fun. And they have the lowest employee engagement scores in the whole company, but it's going to be so fun. And so I thought, well, if I want to know dysfunction, although Kaiser is a wonderful company, don't get me wrong, but this was a really good entry point. And so, I went internal for a couple of years, which turned into 20 years, not all at Kaiser, but I ended up having a 20 plus year career doing HR, doing OD, I kind of did some side hustles, keeping my external practice, but I really was an internal focused OD practitioner. And I blame her because I thought it was going to be a 2-year stint and it ended up being over 20. And so that's a little bit about that story.
Thank you for being in the position.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see.
And again,
fun to watch
friends,
your career.
friends that I've had for over 20 years, I mean, from that position, and,
Oh
you
my
know,
goodness.
just learned a ton.
So Peter, I see you have your hand up. Did you have a quick question on this topic?
Yeah, it was actually about this topic that, okay, so I am personally interested in the AI business transformation. And one of the problems, like it's kind of like a project-based consultation, and they're not established firm that I can go internal. So it came to my mind that, okay, so it's a kind of like a new field. So maybe, I can benefit from doing as an external, starting as a external consultant. So do you think that, okay, you still advise people to go internal, or do you think that no, like when there's a new ground, we can go ahead and then jump into the field as an external consultant?
I don't think that's not an easy answer because I don't think it's that cut and dry. I don't think there's one way or one path. For me, the internal experience was really, really valuable. And I do believe that it shaped and heightened my capabilities as an external. But maybe for different reasons. And that was really, I was interested in this whole idea of human behavior and group dynamics and organizational culture and dysfunction. So the internal experience was very helpful. I don't think you have to do it that way. I think it depends on the kind of work that you want to do. There are many external consultants that have never been internal, and they're excellent consultants. So I think you have to do what's right for you and what really calls to you.
Thank you so much.
Ellie, SJ, any other thoughts on how women being a part of Women in OD or just having these long-term professional relationships have been of support in your career?
Yeah, for me,
Yeah.
I've always
Oh,
been
go
about,
ahead.
oh, you want to
No,
go?
go ahead, SJ.
Uh, For me, it's always been about community. So no matter what, when I was, in communications, I was part of like the Hispanic Public Relations Association or Public Relations Society of America. I'm always like professionally networking and being new, like doing this career transition. It was so important to me, the connections that I made at the national ODN conferences and that future of OD group where we all lived all across the nation, but we on our own in between conferences would fly and meet together a couple times a year just to connect and continue those conversations. Because at that time, at those conferences, some of the original OD elders, or what we called godfathers, little g, big OD, fathers, were really looking to us. We started a young professionals group to network, and really they were thinking about who's going to lead this effort. So there was, like Deanna said, a big responsibility. So having those connections with those who have led the field, it's just so important to me. And I knew there were people I could reach out to. So I was participating in the mentor mentee program. Then one year I was co-facilitating it at the conferences, and that continued for a couple of years, just continuing to meet these, senior OD, highly experienced, wise OD practitioners, or volunteering to be on the conference planning committees and presenting and, you know, um, getting to introduce Ed Shine at a conference. And I'm just thinking like,
Cool.
wow, he's like the guru of process consultation and
Right.
organization culture. And he was like so nice. And I remember how nervous I was. But then afterwards you're chatting with people and they're introducing you, and those connections have remained, and people that have been like a mentor for, 4 days at a conference ended up being mentors for life. So that's my like plug for professional organizations.
No, I appreciate that. With the research from Martin Seligman about, you know, the PERMA model is what comes to mind, the positive emotions, positive relationships, and a sense of meaning. I mean, I saw the way you just lit up talking about introducing Ed Shine and, in the relationships you have. Ellie, you were going to say something. Did you want to contribute to that?
Oh, I just, for me, my relationships have really blossomed in multiple avenues. I mean, getting to know people from CSPP, Alliant, what used to be Alliant, has been a completely different circle. The Pepperdine MSOD folks. I just remember going to this HR networking meeting, and I had just started MSOD, and I started talking with Linda Mangoni. I don't know if you guys remember her, but she said, well, what are you up to? And I said, oh, I am going to Pepperdine doing the MSOD program. And she says, I'm an alum. And we started immediately jumping up and down and hugging. And it was like this connection that led to a long friendship that also became a mentorship for her. She was able to mentor me through the program and help me with finals. And, people just are really generous when you can connect through this kind of a forum. And I really encourage everyone to spend as much time as you can. Not networking is, I think it's really about authenticity and connection and giving and shining your light and learning from each other. And so that's all I would add.
I appreciate that. Jonathan, I see you have your hand up, and it's probably my fault. I think I said ask questions during, but we really want to have most of the questions at the end. But if you have burning questions, don't forget to put them in the chat, and we'll definitely get to them at the end. Jonathan, though, if you want to go ahead and say your question really quickly.
Sure. Those warm connections that you create from networking, I experienced it at the latest OD summit nationally, and it was called AI in OD. So they're trying to reinvent the future of OD, and they can't help themselves, but people form these warm connections. And the first person I saw was David Jameson from Pepperdine. So, those connections really stay warm after a long time. My question is for somebody who's finishing their degree program in organization development or IO psychology, what ways can they connect with those authentic, warm connections with people who are much further along in the field than they are? And given the wrenching changes that are taking place, I think a lot of the entry-level positions are being disbanded because AI is doing the work as assistants. So what I'm curious about is what do you think are pathways for people who are graduating right now that could create the sort of strong human connections that you experienced? Or the experience that will get them somewhere? Like I would guess that Deloitte and the other big consulting firms have their AI process improvement projects going, but then, they need the people side.
Yeah, yeah, Jonathan, I can share my thoughts on that topic. Based on the values of OD, it's about connection. It's about bringing that next generation along. And so what I would say to somebody who's just starting out is a few things. One is reach out to any of your alums that are practicing, that are OD practitioners, because I guarantee if you reach out, they would be more than happy to meet with you, to help guide you, to give of their time. I certainly know that anybody on this call, certainly on this panel, that we would welcome that. And I think it's a core value of OD to do that. It was done for us. We will continue to carry that torch. So I would say leverage your network, leverage your alumni network, and leverage if you are in a university program, a graduate program, leverage your instructors and professors to help make connections. That's one. The other thing, and this was something that I did, 25 years ago, I'm sure it will still work now, is ask to shadow consultants, ask to help out for free and just, volunteer your time so that you get this experience and so that you start making connections. And that's a resume builder. So yes, you're doing it for free, but get the experience that you can so you could get your foot in the door with some experience in big companies. When I was in big companies, that's how I hired people. I mean, I wanted to see that they had some experience, and a lot of them were doing some consulting here and there. And, they were probably doing it for free, and that's okay. So I would say shadow as much as you can. And that's a couple of really, and obviously the ODN network and any other networks that you could participate in. And I would open it up to Ellie or
Yeah,
SJ.
just to add on to that, I remember finishing school and starting a job, and I had to do an org assessment and a strategy for the entire, it was a laboratory. And it was a little bit daunting. And I started thinking about how I was going to pull this off. And I realized that the best thing for me to do was actually to hire a senior OD person as a coach to coach me. And that was a big game changer for me. However, I'll be honest with you. I created the whole strat. I did the full assessment, all these focus groups and interviews and, what we do, and created a report. And I have to say, I presented it to my boss, who was head of HR, and he put it in his drawer and it never resurfaced. So, I don't take that personally. I just think that and I really wanted to talk about this tonight. I think that as change agents, there's a lot of resistance to the work that we do, and that it can be dangerous even to our existence as employees, because we're going up against people's status quo, and it can be threatening. And I think that it's really important that we have, people that we can lean on in our field to help us, meet the client where they're at, deal with ambiguity, being able to be change agents that are going to go slow to go fast, right? Go slow to go fast. All those things that we hear are such true kind of approaches that work or have worked for me. So I just wanted to share that.
I appreciate that. That was a perfect segue to our next topic, which was really talking about what you've learned as career-long OD practitioners, some of the challenges, the very real challenges that can happen and do happen, and how have you learned from your experience to skillfully navigate them? So before you do that, I want to invite the audience. I'm going to put in the chat, and it should be there now. What are some challenges you've observed or experienced in the OD field or in your career that the panelists can speak to if they'd like? But let's go with, let's see, SJ, let's start with you if you don't mind. Given your 20+ years providing OD, how have you learned to best navigate challenging clients, co-workers, or any general office politics even, in your experience?
Relationships.
Say more.
So
What does that mean?
So in terms of challenges, I often hear people talk about, and this might be earlier in their career, like, oh, I want to get to the table. I want to really be valued. How does OD demonstrate value? Again, I'm super lucky because for many years prior to me coming to Kaiser Permanente, OD has been a very respected, very valued function in the organization. And not to say that at different parts of the organization, that maybe the jobs changed or disappeared. But in Southern California, and that's where I'm at primarily, we've really kept our team together over the years, and our leaders over the organization have been pretty much the right-hand person of the president. So getting to the table is not necessarily a tough thing, but what I can say is that because there's been so much change and so much turnover, um, leaders who used to really understand, value, know OD, know how to partner with OD, totally open to being kind of having that mirror in their face and kind of the pushback. If they've never worked with OD because they're new in their role and all these people, they may not be that comfortable. So for me, I have found that sometimes I have a client group that's really easy to work with. And then sometimes I have a client that may be skeptical of OD or not know how to use OD. And so in cases like that, again, it goes back to their relationship and looking back to say, where are the entry points where I can still meet the overall objective or vision for the organization at this point in time that still connects with the business strategy, and where is there an entry point for receptivity? It may not be with that executive, but it may be with the next level down. And so I found by partnering with those senior leaders, you go in, you start doing the work, and then people start to notice. And then, the executive is like, hey, what's going on at that medical center? And why is that different? And then they start to ask more questions, and then you start to get brought in. So that would be like one way. Start where there's an entry point, where there's a relationship, and learn to demonstrate value and practice good OD, the confidentiality, the transparency, mutual respect, joint learning, because it's really about helping them be successful so that they can do the work independent of the OD consultant eventually. So you're building the capacity of the organization and the leaders in the organization.
Love that. Thank you. Those entry points and those relationships. Go ahead.
Yeah, and SJ, just to build on that, I mean, I think there's three things that come to mind for me in terms of huge lessons learned. One, data is king. And so making sure that you're armed with data, that you're following kind of that action research process, because data speaks. I mean, it's objective, it's honest, and it gives you the ammunition that you need to get the right attention and to create the movement. So that's one piece. The other piece, and there's a lot of really seasoned practitioners on this call right now. So you've heard this before, but meeting the client where they're at versus trying to create, a push, you want to create that pull. So really making sure that you understand where their client's at and meet them there, and help nudge them along. And the other bit of probably the biggest lesson that I've ever learned is, you have to start by planting the flower garden. Plant some seeds and see what pops up and go there, but don't plant that flower garden thinking you're going to have the redwoods overnight. And I think we go in so often, saying, why isn't the change here? Why isn't this transformation happening? And why don't we have the redwoods? Well, you got to start with the flower garden, and you got to see what crops up, and you got to go where that energy is. And then to SJ's point, build that coalition of advocates and supporters, and that will create the energy that will spread. So those were some of the things that I probably learned.
I love those. And just to, I guess, round us out with something unusual, I think it's really important that you have tea in your office, that you can serve people. Because, yes, because you really, this is all about relationships, right? You can't think that because you went to school and you learned 5 different methodologies and you're going to focus on one, that it's somehow going to work for folks, because it invariably won't. I remember when I joined the organization that put the report in the file, when I was interviewing people, they said, nothing ever changes here. What you're doing is not going to work. And guess what? They were right.
Oh,
I
no.
mean, that was one of my key learnings because you think, okay, I'm going to use the ideal intervention and this will work because I'm doing it, right? This is an early OD practitioner's approach. And I see some reactions from some of you. So I think maybe you understand what I'm saying, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes. Do you guys anybody want to chime in? I see a lot of head nods and laughing too. Thoughts from the gallery? I mean, this is something that I know that Deanna mentioned. There's a lot of seasoned professionals on tonight, but this is recorded, and there's also a lot of new graduates and, like Sapita's question, new to the field, trying to get in, and your insight is valuable. And even as seasoned practitioners, we always want extra strategies for our toolkit, right? So anybody in the room want to, I saw a lot of head nods, and anybody want to share? Felt like there was some people saying that was a good point in the chat as well. Rachel, go ahead.
No, I wanted to connect back to what you all said earlier, which is you meet people where they are. And that is something that stays in my head, whether I was an internal consultant or now an external consultant. There's so many things, like we read it in the textbook, we have the research, there's all this data that proves things. And then you bring it to a client and they're like, nope, that's not going to work. And at first you kind of feel like, especially early in your career, you feel like that's resistance. Like, why don't they get it? All the data supports it. But what I've learned over the course of my career is that, yes, you can design an amazing intervention. If it's not adopted, it doesn't work. And so sometimes you have to think, this is where, like, how do you pull this whole thing apart? How do we make impact just little by little? And sometimes that means sacrificing some part of the intervention that we thought was fantastic, and really focusing on part of it that moves the needle. And so it's this, when you have been in organizations and experienced it, it's like you kind of have to make all these trade-offs in order for these things to be successful, and just sort of know, like, the more you do it, the more you'll know it. And I just always think about, meet them where they are, because if you go too far, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and Rachel, that is such a good point about having to sacrifice some of the and making trade-offs. And another huge lesson that it's probably taken me, 30 years to actually learn is there is no room for your ego in
Nope.
this. There's absolutely no room for your ego. And it's not about us. It's not about us as consultants. And it's so hard to really grasp that concept. And it's taken me a whole career to work on it and learn that. But letting things go is really, really important to truly meet a client.
I'm seeing that Scott Weimer added in the chat, Deanna, to your point, mainly not taking resistance personally. And how do we do that again? Serve them tea, Ellie?
Yeah, it's not
I
about
really
us.
think so. I really think, I'm not kidding. You should have tea and nice glasses, cups that you can serve, that people sit down and they actually connect with you. Like, oh my gosh, it's not just a 3 bullet point meeting, it's a connection. So important.
If I may chime in, I mean,
Please.
I think the idea of, in the field over the years, we evoked Dave Jameson's name, the use of self. I've found that there's a direct correlation to my OD practice, to my personal growth over the years. So those of us you've gone through whatever variation on personal growth, especially in the more challenging areas. I do conflict resolution and DEI and the like, where things get a little bit more thorny, so to speak, that you can only help as you can show up and be knowing yourself, so to speak, to help the system change.
Bring it on. You're the biggest OD tool that you could bring to the client is yourself. No ego.
How do you have no ego again?
I think think a lot of the most successful consultants actually are more like the Wizard of Oz. They, in a positive way. I mean, I think that they are behind the curtain and they help people feel that they're coming up with the answers, that they're leading the change. And so we have to just step out of our comfort zone with being the facilitators and the change agents and all of that. If we're really going to be successful, it's like, wow, that was a really good idea you had. Who else feels like that would be something we could do here? Would you like to take that on? This kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
It looks like Jumana, forgive me if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, but you said the HR line will make or break us in OD. Can you say more for our panelists to chime in on that?
Yep. I mean, I'm sure most of us have come across this, but they are, I think of them as my field sales team. If I don't have a good trusting relationship with them, they won't even bring me work because uh, I'm not embedded in the business. And until I have the opportunity to build those strong relationships with business leaders, I need them to give me work, right, to help fill my team's pipeline. So if you don't have a strong relationship with them and you're not, they'll very often also serve as gatekeepers. They will keep you away from the business if they're feeling threatened or they, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable bringing you in. They feel like it. I've even had some of them sometimes be honest with me that they're worried about what I would think about them because of the situation their organization's in. So, I think those are all challenges we have to deal with also.
Yeah.
And if I can just comment, Sandy, I think that it's important that people in our field also study HR. And it's served me a lot in my career because I started at UCLA's certification for human resources management. And it was foundational. And if you can do a blended role, like at Disney, I was both the HR OD for 3 departments. And that really allowed me to be strategic and for people to come to me and ask me questions that seemed HR-ish, but then turned into full-blown projects that were OD related.
I'm
I
curious to know what the other
agree.
panelists believe. Yeah, please. go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, I agree with that. I've
Do.
spent much of my career in blended roles or in HR business partner roles. And I think it's really important because it's a great entry point. And a lot of times the client doesn't know what they don't know. And they think they're bringing in an HR partner because of whatever the surface issue is. And they don't know how to articulate it. But if you have the OD skills and you're truly an OD person disguised as an HR person, you're getting in there and doing, the assessment and being able to, craft the intervention, and it's a wonderful entry point. Now, if you're in a true OD role, that's part of a COE, which maybe that's what you're in, Joanna, it is so critical that you build the capabilities of the HR partners and, help them become OD practitioners. So suddenly you have advocates, out there. Because I've run into that too, where they're gatekeepers or they're worried and so what I've used is a strategy to build their OD capability themselves.
Great
And
tip.
that
Go
actually
ahead.
builds onto a comment that I made earlier. It was actually posed as a question to all of you around how have you, because that's what in the last 2 roles that I've had, I've spent a lot of my time trying to build capability internally in the OD space. Because number one, like I have a team of 3 to try to scale and support an organization of 13,000 plus globally. It's just the OD model hardly ever works. I was at Disney also, and it didn't work there either. So the model around OD just is like, to me as an OD person, just boggles my mind. But the way that I've tried to overcome that is by creating learning experiences and having people shadow people on my team or give me a portion of their time to support initiatives so that I can scale beyond just the 3 FTEs that we
Yeah.
have. So how have you done that within the organizations that you've led?
That's really, really a great question. I will tell you the last organization before I went external, I was working with a company called Medtronic. We have about 90,000 employees and, are in 150 countries. It was a global role, and I had globally, but it is 90,000 people. I had a total of 36 people, but I would say half of those were data analytics people. So very, very small team. And the first thing that I did when I was standing up the OE department, because I was basically leading the organization effectiveness COE, is I built an HR academy. And I just started bringing those HR business partners through that, and they were getting OD consulting skills, they were getting org design, they were getting, all of that, because there was no way that we'd be able to deliver. And so we basically built a coalition of OD practitioners to the HR business partners. And that was hugely successful.
Were they
So
just HR business partners, or did you also, because I also included other HR functions as well.
you could do whatever your organization needs. The key is to build the capability and the skill and scale, right?
Right.
For us, it was really the HR business partners were the ones that were going to help us do that. So that's where we started. We had talked about expanding that, and if somebody was not in the business partner role, it's not that that wasn't important. It's just not where we had the dollars or the focus or the energy to prioritize.
Okay, thanks.
Just going to add, my experience has been a little bit different in terms of where I get the work. So I don't necessarily get the work from HR, even though they're trying now to do more of an HR business model. And in that, trying to diversify the skill set of some of our HR business partners. But my work comes directly from the client. But what I have found over the years is that clients will shop around in the organization. So they have what they perceive as a problem. They might go to HR. They might go to the labor management partnership consultant. They may go to the service consultant. They may, go to the engagement leader. They may go to OD. They may or may not want to tell their boss that they're struggling with this issue. So one of the things that I found really successful is to bring, again, a community of practice of those internal consultants or functions to meet on a regular basis to kind of share the trends that we're seeing in the organization, so that none of us are getting pulled in too late. We can kind of shift the work to when it's most appropriate for whom, and do more collaboration, and then build a case for the client about how working together we can do it more holistically and bring them into a process. So that's one way that we've done it.
And just to briefly just say that being able to develop HR folks, I think, is a brilliant move, Deanna, because they want to be strategic, and those skills that you can infuse in an HR team actually do make them strategic. So that's one. And the other piece is really around leadership development. If you get tired of knocking your head against the wall, join me. Because I tell you, LD walks in and people light up. They're like, oh, you want to develop the leaders? That's great. It's totally different than I'm going to change your culture.
There. Thank you.
That's awesome. Those are some great advisements. Thank you. I want to transition now to some of the positives that you've learned over your career. So thinking about the insights that you have, the competencies that you see, what advice, what key competencies or skills or demeanors, behaviors to reinforce or build? I heard one, for instance, I've heard relationships, I've heard build up your competency in HR. I know that one of the questions was about how nebulous OD is and how there's a lot of blended roles out there, whether I think when you said LD, Ellie, you were speaking of leadership development, but there's also L&D, which is learning and development and talent development and, change management and OD, right? And OE, organizational effectiveness. So I'm curious to know, in terms of the competencies for a successful, someone who is a core, even if you do have an HR role, but I love OD, you're an OD practitioner, and you're going to bring that skill set. What are those key competency skills that you see is needed, for you, that you've experienced, that you've observed in your career as experienced OD practitioners?
I knew you were going to ask this question, and I gave it some thought earlier today, and I
Thank
jotted
you.
down. I had like 10 things came to mind, and I'm like, okay. And then there's like these subcategories. I like bring it back
Uh-oh.
in, SJ. But Michael mentioned the one that was at the top of my list, and it goes
Oh.
back to having a deep understanding and awareness of yourself. And again, that you are the greatest resource that you bring to the client when you're in that moment. And so in order to do that, self is instrument. You really need to know yourself well as an OD practitioner. So having that emotional intelligence, the empathy, the vulnerability, perseverance, let go of the ego, the ability to connect and build trust. I also felt that contracting, no matter how long you've worked with a client, contracting at some level is very key, because it's in those contracting conversations that you really get a much more clear understanding of what the client sees as the potential problem, the work, and being able to ask questions around, what's at stake for them. So you're really getting a clear picture of how you're going to approach the work together. And then what does it look like when maybe things aren't going as planned, and you've already contracted to bring up those conversations in advance, or to know what the client's going to look like when they're feeling stuck or threatened or not happy with the project, because you've kind of fleshed that out. So the contracting is not just the data gathering and the deliverables, but really what the relationship looks like too. So strong communication skills, I think, ability to synthesize complex data. We talked about being a strong analyst, or having a team of strong analysts, but being able to use the data in a helpful manner. So that's data and action research is driving the decisions. Coaching and facilitation, I think, is key, because it's all about creating a safe space for people to be who they are, fully engaged, because it's the people in the organization that are going to do the work, that have the best ideas, right? But we have to create the container for that. So I think really strong facilitation skills for that. And right now, I think I've always had an interest in like spirituality at work, or what does that mean, bringing your whole self? It's kind of that inclusive belonging piece, but like during COVID, there's such an emphasis on well-being, but I think that's really rooted into the field. It is a field about healthy people, human dynamics, understanding those, because healthy people make healthy organizations, can adapt and grow and thrive. So I think that's important too. And then just, the normal stuff, being a strategic thinker and a systems thinker, and being able to knowledgeable about change theory and org design and coaching. So like that's a lot. But
SJ, I'm about to cry over here. You had me on the healthy people create healthy orgs. I was like, oh my God, that spoke to my soul. Also,
yeah, it's just
all
so
the
important. I mean,
strategies.
Allie and I did this session for one of our leaders on transformational leadership, and we took a model and we changed it up. I don't even remember what the original model was, but it was one of a transformational leadership models. But we kind of KP languaged it so that it really resonated with people. And it really is about helping people on the most simple level connect with people on a people level, because they just want to know that people care for them, And if they know that they are cared for and they are loved at work, they're going to give their heart and energy, and you're growing them and you're nurturing them, and they're going to take more risks, and they're going to want to really help the organization succeed because they're going to see where their values align, where their gifts align, and it's such important work.
I was going to defer to you, Deanna, because I want to make sure you're equally recognized here, because it seems like I'm talking too much. So I just want you to
No,
go.
you're not at all. And I mean, I would just echo everything that SJ said, except the one word that I would throw in there that I would add is courage. The work that we do
Mhm.
takes a ton of courage. And when it starts getting dicey, fall back to the core values and principles of what is OD. And, how are you elevating that human experience at work? Because that's really what it's all about. And that takes a ton of courage.
Yeah, and just to, I guess my list includes, because we did get this one in advance, being willing to push back. I know I talked about building relationships, but I think at the same time you have to be able to push back. But you also have to join an organization where you're not necessarily tied to the approval of the people who you're trying to change, right? You're not trying to change people, but you're trying to change an organization. So at KP, for example, we are tied to region, which is basically separate from the senior leaders in our medical center. So if they don't like what you're doing, they're not the ones that will fire you, right? It's a very different model. And so that's one thing, like that whole push-pull in terms of how do I do this work without personally risking my income, right?
Exactly. That's such a great point. No, seriously, like I would love you to
Yeah.
speak to that because that's exactly right. The work of a change agent, that's so critical. How would you suggest to artfully do that?
I think you have to look at the offer that you're getting for the job to begin with and be very careful about the reporting relationships. I have been offered jobs with CFOs. Nope, won't do it. Won't do it. You just really have to think about what you're stepping into and whether you're going to be able to be successful at it. And back to the competencies, I think it's knowing how you're perceived and really being able to do the work to have a high emotional intelligence, because there's going to be a lot of times when you have to stop and you have to breathe through a meeting. I actually have it tattooed on my arm. Breathe. Okay. And I think planning well and hanging loose is a big deal too. Jean Watkins was one of my mentors, and she used to say that. She's like, plan everything, then go with the flow, right? Hang
Love
loose
that.
about it.
Plan well and then hang loose.
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that what you said? Okay.
Yeah,
I
because
just wanted to
you
share with
have to.
you, Ellie, that this is
Yeah.
on the computer.
Is it
Breathe.
breathe?
Oh,
Just
that's
breathe.
fantastic.
So
Yeah.
clearly there's a theme here.
Well, and my memoir is called Now You Can Breathe. So that's the other thing. Yeah.
That's
Wow.
one of the things I learned about myself too, as I'm a shallow breather. And so one of my go-to for my own stress is really, I have to take a time out and do mindful breath exercises and really expand my breathing because I'm shallow breather.
Mhm.
Yes.
And I love the way you guys mentioned like knowing thyself and the relationships. Also knowing how you're perceived. Tell me more, how would you recommend going about that? Knowing how you're perceived. You said that, Ellie, just
So
now.
I really think it's the Johari window, right? So if you don't know the Johari window, it was Joe and Harry, Joe Ingram, was it? I know Jonathan knows the answer to this. Harry Ingram and Joe, anyway, Johari, Johari, Annette knows. I see Annette is about to put it in the chat. Thank you, Annette. And basically what you're realizing is that there's the things that you know about yourself, but there's things that other people know about you that you don't even know, right? So how do we open the window? We open it through getting feedback. And so we ourselves need to be the models for asking for feedback, and letting people know it's a gift. It's really a gift to hear how we're perceived and then that we are growing. Bob Tannenbaum, who was one of the founders of our field, was all about personal growth. He said right before he passed away, I have so much more growth to do. I'm just getting started. I'm just getting started on my own growth. This is a guy that just walked the talk. He absolutely walked the talk. And we're never going to be at the level that we need to be at to do this work. We all have to realize we haven't arrived, right?
Mm,
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, Ellie. And just from a pragmatic standpoint, theory matters. I mean,
Mm.
it is really important to, understand yourself, have the courage, all these behavioral things, but this field is anchored in theory. And as a new practitioner, make sure that you're learning the theories behind all of this, because you're not going to talk about the theories with your clients. They would tune out immediately and they would actually push you away probably, but you need to know them because everything we do is drawn from them. And I think that's what differentiates a good OD practitioner from somebody who's not that great is really truly understanding and knowing the fundamentals of OD. And, we had some amazing gurus and a lot of them are gone now. And we had the good fortune on this call that we got to experience them when they were alive and we got to learn from them firsthand. And that was pretty cool. And I'm not exactly sure who's going to carry the torch, going forward as we go into this field, but make sure you know and you carry those theories forward.
Excellent.
Little
Thank you.
bit of
I'm
advice.
seeing that there is a question that that came up from Annie. Annie, feel free to jump on and expand on it, but it's I would be curious to know if any of the panelists have recommendations for strengthening the data component of OD work, either resources or continuing ed or folks to follow. I think somebody said data is king. Is that what
I
that was?
think it was Deanna. Deanna, do you
Deanna?
want to take that? Because I think you're really strong in that.
Deanna said it, I echo it, but I
Okay.
don't have a really great advice around that, except similar to what she said, she had a team of data analytics people.
Right.
But you as an OD practitioner need to really understand what you're gathering, how you're gathering it, why you're gathering it, anticipate the questions and the needs that the client has, so that you can then take that data to help them make better decisions.
Mhm.
But I don't know about a course or a certification. I mean, yeah.
So, mea culpa. I was trying to multitask on this call by reading the chat while you guys were talking, and I can't do that. And so I missed the whole question.
It was if the panelists have recommendations for strengthening the data component of OD work. The data component of OD work, either resources, continuing ed, folks to follow.
Yeah, there are a lot of great resources out there. I think in the chat we were throwing around David Green, and I think there was a question about is he the person that wrote XYZ book, and I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to go and look at that, but he's somebody really wonderful to follow. I mean, you could take courses, you could, as SJ said, hire people, you could experience it. It's really about truly making meaning of that data, and telling the story around that data and understanding the implications of this data. There's a lot of resources to follow and I could dig up some of mine. Hang out with really strong data analytics people. That's really kind of I mean, I learned data analytics through, my graduate program. That was something that's how I learned that. And then I just learned from experiencing, in the corporate world. And there's a lot of a push right now for predictive analytics. And I think that's the direction that organizations are wanting to go. It's not just about making meaning of the data now, but also being able to predict proactively what this data is telling you so that you can make better choices. So if you're thinking about things to study or get your arms around, predictive analytics is one of them. Certainly this whole world of AI, which is kind of, that's ahead of the curve that I'm on. But
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you mentioned AI because I think we all need to embrace it. We can take, I was just saying today to our head of organization effectiveness, OD, well, actually our OD and LD leaders, that you can drop everything that you have on your hard drive. So we all have toolkits, right? You can drop everybody's toolkit into one GPT, and then everyone can get the information that is on your hard drive when they need it. So for example, I had a leader say with SJ, and we looked at each other like blankly, I want an offsite for a full day with 70 people on transformational leadership. And I'm not available to give you any more information because I'm booked for the next 2 weeks and it's going to be in 10 days, right? What do? We put it into AI and we got everything we needed, including when we asked for, remember SJ, we actually asked for a case study that could be a breakout, and it gave us a healthcare case study without asking. And it was incredible. Really granted, we had to work on it until midnight for a couple of nights. I'll always remember that team building that we did together. But we suddenly knew that this was actually a thing.
Oh yeah.
Transformational leadership. And so it is your friend. It is totally your friend, AI.
And we will leave it there. That is the perfect, if you guys didn't drop the most knowledge, the most, I mean, talk about field insights and competencies, that's absolute. And I know, Jonathan, I have to say I'm proud of you. I know it's taking all that you have to not chime in on the AI discussion. It's been a charge of our organization, much so if our chair of innovation, to help bring members along that AI journey. And I am grateful for it, Jonathan. So thank you. All right, we have a speed round, okay? We have a speed round and then we're gonna have Q&A and then we're gonna be done for tonight. So speed round, okay, you have 30 seconds. Each of you will answer the question. Are you ready? So you're gonna answer the question and then you are gonna just say why you value this within 30 seconds before it's the next person. And I have on my screen, Ellie, SJ, then Deanna. So Ellie, you start. 30 seconds, Ellie. Hold on, let me get my clock. 30 seconds. You ready?
Yeah.
30 seconds. We have our first question, speed round. Ready? 30 seconds. What's your go-to book? And all of you are going to answer this first question. There's four questions. This first question, each of you are answering this first one. You have 30 seconds, Ellie. What's your go-to book, podcast, or resource for leveling up or staying informed in OD? Go.
Okay, I'm going to give you 3. Melissa Daimler has written a great book called Reculturing. Peter Block has Flawless Consulting. You've got to know that one. And Jane Watkins is the queen of appreciative inquiry.
Flawless Consulting right here. Okay. SJ, she was under, I don't know how you did that. What was the third one? I missed the last one.
The last one was Jane Watkins wrote a book called, I'm trying to remember the exact title, but it was on appreciative inquiry. Yes, it's my favorite of all of them.
Okay.
He's no longer with us.
Same question. Go. 30 seconds.
The Consultant's Calling by Jeff Bellman. Extraordinary Groups by Bellman and Kathleen Ryan. And Galbraith's or Design Book, if we're talking books.
Okay. Dang. Also under 30 seconds. These are masters over here. Okay, Deanna, your turn.
We're going to have some repeats here. Flawless Consulting has been, will be always my Bible. Okay. And Love Consultants Calling. And there's another book called No A-Holes. I'll leave it at that. That's
No A-Holes. Okay, we have something for our book club, Scott. All right, we have a list. Awesome. I didn't see anybody mention the podcast. I would say Adam Grant. So I'm going to ask the audience to also chime in on the chat, please. So the question was go-to book, podcast, or resource for leveling up or staying informed in OD. I like Adam Grant. I know he's an org psychologist. I think he's amazing.
I would love to hear podcasts if we can generate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please put
put
those
your
in
podcast
the
in.
chat. Okay, next question, 30 seconds. Ellie, we start with you. What's one thing you wish you had known earlier in your OD career?
It's not knowledge, it's connection.
Dang, that's good. Hold on, say more.
I have 30
seconds.
Read my book, Authentic Connection, when it comes out in July.
In July. All right. And you'll be our speaker. We'll book you for 2026.
Okay, great.
Q1 2026 for your book. All right, SJ, your turn.
I know this has been talked about a little bit, but meet the client where they're at. It's not just a cliche. It's very important because especially, young in my career early on, coming in with a passion, gathered the data, I could see maybe what the client could not see or could not see at the time or didn't want to see. And you can come across as being too opinionated or know-it-all or lose your client. So I'd say meet them where they're at. And also never work harder than the client.
Ooh,
I think
that's good. Dang, and you stopped right on the buzzer, but I need to know more. Okay, we need follow-up for that. All right, we'll have to find out more on that one. Deanna, your turn, 30 seconds.
Play big, relax, use your voice.
Your
Say
what?
more. Play
Oh, what
big.
more?
Yeah.
Oh, one more question. Okay.
Okay. All right. So let's do, well, I was saying say more about what you just said, because you said play big, relax, and what was the third one?
Use your voice.
Use your voice. Love that. Okay. Next question. This is third. We have two more questions, 30 seconds. Ellie, you start. What's one skill every OD professional should master in working with C-suite executives?
All right, I've got this. How to draw a model on the back of a napkin or a plain sheet of paper that a C-level executive can interact with to be a thought partner with you on what you're thinking, right?
Oh, yeah, I love that.
You have to know how to create your own models too. Don't just go for the ones in the books.
I love that. Okay, dropping knowledge over here. I knew this panel was going to be so good. All right, SJ, your turn. What's one thing, one skill every OD professional should master in working with C-suite executives?
I think that being at the top can often be lonely or scary, so that you need to understand your client and what keeps them engaged and creates meaning and purpose for them. So while you're doing the work with them, you're also meeting their personal need in their role.
So good. Deanna?
The power of storytelling, because the more senior the executive is, the less patience they have for a lot of detail, and they want to hear it in the form of a story.
Okay. Dropping knowledge over here. All of them within time. All right, we have one last one. I hope you guys are ready. 30 seconds. Ellie, starting with you, what's the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
You have, I'm going to say it slowly, you have everything you need to be successful. I'll do. Okay. So what I want you to do is to trust your gut and realize that you have wings to fly.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Thank you, Ellie.
I see your wings was the advice. I see your wings.
I see your wings. Woo!
And I cried. I sobbed. I couldn't believe it.
I love it. SJ, same question. Best career advice.
Stretch out of your comfort zone.
Tell us more.
One of my first mentors, she kept saying, you're ready, even though you don't see it or you're feeling it. I can see it. Stretch out of your comfort zone. You're going to fly. Like, yeah.
Love that. Thank you. Deanna?
Yeah, mine's a repeat. It's plant the flower garden, not the redwoods.
Yeah, love that. Love that. All right. we're going to go into our Q&A. We have a little less time than I would have liked. I think we've had opportunities to talk, but if there's any question that the audience has that you have not heard yet, that maybe has come to mind throughout this conversation, please go ahead and put it in the chat, or feel free to just unmute yourself and ask the question. Now's the time. And I'll look at the chat to see if there's anything I missed. And Jonathan, if you could help me see if there's any ones that we've missed here.
I actually wrote a question in myself that I know will be of interest to some people. Deanna, you mentioned use your voice. So not everybody knows what their voice is. How do you help people? How can people develop their voice regardless of their stage of career or at each stage of career?
Yeah, so I could share what I meant by use your voice. I don't know if I have the answer to that full question that you're asking, but for me, it's really about courage, right? Because your voice matters. What you have to say matters. So don't withhold that, because your voice is actually a gift that you're giving. And so I think early, at least early in career, confidence is a big deal. And, you know, sometimes you don't use your voice because you don't think it adds value, or maybe you're afraid, or whatever the case. I wish when I was earlier in my career that somebody said, have courage, use your voice, because that's where the gift is. And so it's really about courage, Jonathan, I think. Have courage to play big. Don't play small.
Great. Thank you.
Sometimes when I'm working with senior leaders and executives, the coaching around using their voice, I sometimes have to help them to see that as a leader, they have a responsibility, not just to the organization and the people they lead, but to the people that we serve, the whole reason that the organization exists. And if they're thinking about something and they believe it to be true or important or worthy, that they have a responsibility to raise the issue and to know that they will be supported in exploring what that conversation looks like. Because I mean, that's, to me, OD is about, you know, and change is one conversation at a time, and helping people use their voice to have those conversations.
That's such a great point, SJ, because we all know that if we have the question, if we're sitting there in that room and we have the question, so do a lot of other people. And giving voice to that is so incredibly important.
Okay.
I would just add, share
yeah,
your
please.
joy. Share your joy as well. Because I think when we walk into a room, if we're light and we're shining our light, people are magnetically attracted to that, and they're more willing to hear us. And that voice matters at that point to them. You see what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
Awesome.
Is that not tremendous? Did we not get the best panelists? I mean, I just want to say thank you guys so much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our audience. Thank you for joining us tonight. On behalf of myself and the board of directors and our members, I just want to express our heartfelt gratitude to our panelists. And please, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you for sharing your invaluable insights and expertise. And thank you for your dedication in advancing our profession.